welcome to the International Decade for People of African Descent Assembly Guyana Youth Committee's Spill the Facts program. Joining us tonight is my fellow co-host, Kristie Duff, and our dynamic lineup of speakers to discuss that crucial period in life, that is our transition to adulthood. While school has taught us many things, it has not yet mastered the art of preparing us for adulthood. Our speakers, however, have gone through this metamorphosis and will share with us tonight how to make this transition, well, a less painful one. So I will turn you over to my co-host, Kristie, who will be taking us through our 1 minute of silence. Kristie?
A pleasant good evening, everyone. Over the past couple of months, we have all witnessed a surplus of racism via social media platforms. Here at the International Decade for People of African Descent, we do not condone racism of any kind. Hence, we are inviting you to take part in a minute of silence dedicated to the injustices currently taking place locally and globally. The minute begins now. Our minute of silence has just ended. We would like to thank all participants for taking part in our minute of silence. I will now ask my co-host to do her introduction, as we have 4 marvelous panelists for the program tonight. But before she does this, we'll briefly go through our etiquette for video conferencing. The host and participants should ensure that all microphones are muted when not in use. Persons desirous of asking questions may do so through utilizing the raise hand icon. Questions should be answered in the said order in which the hands were raised. When unmuted to answer a question, the participant would say their name and to which group they belong to. If persons wish to make suggestions or references to information being addressed at that time, they may utilize the comment feature located on the bottom of their screen. They can also use the Q&A feature. Ms. Lowe?
Thank you for allowing me to share this platform with you all to discuss such an engrossing topic. Our dynamic lineup of speakers whom I've had the pleasure of interacting with are Ms. Marva Gordon, Ms. Flemlyn Ragobeer, Pastor Simon Harris, and Mr. Ronald Daniels. Pastor Harris, while he served as a pastor to church members, has also served within the arena of community development. He has been a beacon of light and an inspiration to young boys and girls in Guyana. He received his training in anthropology and sociology, as well as life lessons that prepared him for his current involvement in social work. He goes by the quote that people must see that community transformation is possible. He even said, "I believe bad people are just good people looking for a compassionate leadership, and they must find it within the church." Our next speaker is Ms. Flemlyn Ragobeer, who has her roots in Hopetown, West Coast, Belize. Ms. Ragobeer hails from the village of Agricola, Greater Georgetown, which was a village bought by former enslaved Africans. Spending the first 28 years of her life in Agricola, she believes that those years, coupled with her decision over 20 years ago to become a Christian, defines largely who she is today. Aware of many hats, she highlights that she is a daughter, a wife, and mother, all roles she feels honored to serve in. She is a graduate of the University of Guyana with a degree in international relations and the Wesleyan Bible College with a Master of Arts degree in Christian ministry, with a minor in counseling psychology, where she graduated as valedictorian in 2007. As a former employee of the Education Development Center based in Washington, D.C., she worked as a juvenile justice coach of the USA Sky Project, funded by the Caribbean Basin Initiative under the Obama administration, and she's currently serving as the national director of a faith-based organization, Interschool InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. Most recently, she graduated in 2019 from the University of Guyana with a Commonwealth Executive Masters in Public Administration. Ms. Flemlyn enjoyed working with youth for the past 20 years and has based most of her work in the arena of youth development. Kristie?
Marva Gordon. Marva was born in Georgetown, Guyana, but grew up in the easternly unique town of New Amsterdam, Berbice. A certified business intelligence professional, database administrator, computer technologist, and Microsoft Office specialist by training, Marva earned her bachelor's in information systems from New York University. With a very exciting history and years of experience working as a computer specialist and volunteering as a literacy and numeracy advocate in the United States of America and Guyana, in 2012, together with friends and family, Marva founded an NGO, the Gordon Family and Friends, a charitable nonprofit organization in New Amsterdam, Berbice, with its main goal promoting and bringing awareness to the importance of education, literacy, and learning to the vulnerable at-risk children, youths, and adults of New Amsterdam. Ronald Daniels, from the mining town of Linden, is a son, husband, and father. He has always been committed to lending himself unconditionally to improving the lives of his countrymen. Ronald, as he preferred to be called, is a graduate of Central High School. He is a qualified land surveying technician and civil and building engineering technician. He practices attorney at law in Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and he is a senior associate at Hughes Field and Stobie Law Firm. Without any further delay, let's get right into the discussion, which will take the form of an interview. We have prepared some questions for our panelists on their transition process into adulthood. If you, the audience, have any questions, kindly utilize the Q&A or chat feature on the bottom of your screen. Our first question is directed to all panelists. At what stage in your lives did you realize that you had transitioned to adulthood? And what role does identity play in this transition? Mr. Daniels, would you like to start us off?
For sure. Just a pleasant good evening to all of your viewers. I extend my profound gratitude to the executive members and the general membership of IDPADA-G for the invitation to have this conversation with you. And really my profound honor to share this panel with such a rich complement of persons. And of course, my profound gratitude to our two hosts. At what stage of my life have I realized that I've transitioned into adulthood? Oh, frankly, I think that I'm really still transitioning. Perhaps if you ask my kids, they will tell you that I'm really just a big child. On my way to adolescence. Now, on a serious note, for me personally, I've been forced to grow up really, really quickly as a consequence of my social and parental circumstances. So in my mind, I had been an adult from a relatively tender age. I'll say from the age of about 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. I was already taking on responsibilities that surpassed those that children my age were accustomed to. So I would say, as I've indicated, that for me was my transition, even though I had not matured in years. I'd matured in terms of mindset and in a sense in terms of the weight of my responsibility, even to the extent of providing or for myself to some extent or financially. And I'll hand over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Ms. Gordon, what about you?
Well, that is a tough question. When did I realize that I transitioned to adulthood? I must say it must be the time when I left the comfort of my home and my country to travel overseas. That's when I realized that I am no longer a kid and no longer have the comfort, or I must say the security of my parents and my family, when I realized that I had to learn to be an adult in terms of learning how to take care of myself, taking care, making decisions for myself, and actually just transitioning in the world of adulthood and learning what it is to be an adult. Because I was sheltered growing up. I come from a huge family. So I was sheltered by my parents and then my older siblings. So I didn't have to be responsible for a lot of things. But when I left home, that's when it hit me that, you know what, you're finally growing up. You finally have to make decisions that will affect the rest of your life, because this is your life now. But even saying that, although that I had to go through that, I still had the security of my family, still had my siblings. They were always there for me. So in a way, just like Mr. Daniel said, we're still growing up, you know, still learning this thing called adulthood, because we're not independent. We're still dependent on our family and our friends to keep us grounded, to keep us focused, so that we can be the, what am I say, the good adults that we're expected to be. So I am still transitioning as well, even though I think everybody will say, well, wait a minute, I think you've passed that age, but I don't think we ever do, because we always have to have family and friends around to support us and also help us to guide us to make decisions in our lives.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Pastor Harris?
Well, my transition into adulthood, I concur with the two speakers that went before me. But my transition to adulthood, I would say it was a period, and that started happening maybe since I was maybe 16 or 17, because I came from a household, thankfully, where mom and dad were present. And even though I was taken care of and I didn't have to worry about much, my father specifically taught me a lot of responsibility. And at that age, started giving me responsibility around the house. I remember he started giving me an allowance back then was $2.50, I think. And I had to give back 50 cents to the house. I guess that was for my upkeep. but so I started to learn early. I started transitioning through a period. And then my father was self-employed. He was a rubber stamp maker. And then he began to give me responsibility with the business. And then in terms, he had a lot of clients. He used to make rubbers, along with being a cartoonist for the New Nation, then the Chronicle, then the Mirror Force, and then the Stabrook News. I was responsible many times for delivering those cartoons. And then I eventually became a cartoonist myself. And so it was a period. And if there's a point I can say when I realized I was kicked out of the nest and I was fully on my own, it would have been 1988. That's when I got married, and I was in a house with my brand new wife. But I was, in a number of years, I was prepared for that. So that has been my journey to adulthood. And well, bless God, it's still going well. There are times I behave like a child, but it's to help keep me sane. And I do that around my wife and children.
And finally, Ms. Ragobeer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me on. I want to go with Mr. Daniels, well, everyone, but even as Ronald was speaking earlier about his early days, I think my parents and my siblings told me that I was sort of always ahead of my time in terms of, from very early as a child, I was always independent and always trying to be responsible, even for older persons, instead of allowing it to be the other way around. And perhaps that was because I was the youngest of all my siblings, and for a long time, the youngest at home. And so I benefited from all the maturity that was around me. But I would say, to answer the question more specifically, somewhere around the age of 17, 18, I had that sense of transition into adulthood. I still lived at home, but I think that realization also was heightened when I got my first job as a teacher, and later on went to do my first degree at the University of Guyana. And I had to largely take responsibility for my transportation and upkeep during those times. But I think my transitioning, I became really aware of it around that time. And I think, like Pastor Harris and the others, moving away from home, when I became married at 28, then is when everything really hit me. Well, now you're fully responsible, but I had a lot of responsibility for myself from very, very early on, very early on.
Thank you, Ms. Ragobeer.
The second question is again for you, Ms. Ragobeer and Mr. Daniels. So since Ms. Ragobeer just answered, maybe we can have Mr. Daniels first, and then we can have her second. The question is, what are some important decisions that you made as a young person that have contributed significantly to where you are today in terms of your professional careers and family life?
Good. Among the important decisions that I've made relatively early on is to really be a hard worker. I remember that my first job was at the age of 11. At that time, my brother-in-law used to do what we call walk in and sell. So at 11, I started working with him. I don't remember where I got my capital from, but I managed to amass the capital, and I went with him, bought some items, and he showed me the ropes. So we would walk the four corners of Georgetown, and I would sell different items. I remember I used to sell like these drinking mugs. I would sell certain small household items and stuff. So that commitment to work hard is always virtually being with me. And hence my having indicated earlier that that transition phase started relatively early for me. So in committing to work hard, what that does, it impresses upon you, as it did upon me, a certain sense of focus. It doesn't mean that I didn't go off the tracks perhaps more often than others, but I always found my way back onto the tracks. So that focus has really been an asset to me when I migrated into the quote unquote adulthood that we're expected to transition into at that 17, 18, 19 or 20-year-olds phase of our life. And when we graduate through the different phases of our academic life, our professional life, that is certainly complemented my transition into the wider world of works. It complemented my transition through the various academic institutions that I attended, and it also complemented my transition into the professional arena. So again, I would reiterate that commitment to hard work and that focus in getting whatever it is I've set myself within my crosshairs done. And might I pass over to Ms. Ragobeer?
All right, thank you, Ronald. For me, this was a tough question. It was a searching question, but I think I came up with two sets of answers. And the first one that I thought of had to do with early on making a decision to really value and pursue education. And I would say both formal in terms of the structured way of going to school and learning and getting certificates and a degree and so on, as well as informal education, extra co-curricular activities and those kinds of things, learning a lot of life skills, learning to cook and try different things and so on. Very early, I thank God that I had parents and loved ones who insisted that I attended school and spent what they had on me so that I would make my way through life. But I think the significant difference that was made was when I really personally decided, and I decided very early on. Actually, my dad had a rule, he only bought books for me. I only got books, really lively books or something educational. I had to depend on my sisters to get dolls or something like that. So very early on, I decided that I would not only value, but I will take steps to prepare myself and to pursue education. I'm told, I remember my family saying that from an early age of 7, I had declared that I wanted to be a lawyer, and that's a whole nother story. I wanted to be a lawyer, but personally, I just decided that I wanted to do my best to learn what I needed to earn for and just grow on from there. The second decision in terms of significance that has happened in my life or I've made in my life really and truly has to do with my decision to become a Christian. There are many things that I've decided to do in my life, but as I looked and I listened and I'm thinking about this question, it really hands down has to be my decision to serve the Lord Jesus, allow the Lord to become king of my life. Really and truly becoming a Christian for me is where I personally learned my true intrinsic value. I'm still learning extrinsic value. I'm still learning how much I can bring to the table. I'm learning why I am worth the space I occupy. It was Christianity for me that taught me things like the grace of forgiveness and how to bounce back, how to be resilient. And that really, in the face of all of life challenges, really is where I draw my strength from. Salvation, definitely for me, as we say it, becoming a follower of Jesus really has been the biggest blessing in my life. Of course, after that, deciding to marry the man that I marry and raising the children that God has blessed us with. But I would say definitely, Kristie, that it has to do my two biggest decisions, the most significant decisions I have made, really is with the support of my family and loved ones, making a personal decision to value and pursue education. And then when I had the good sense and I learned that I should really allow Jesus to be Lord, because that has really hands down transformed my life to the person I am today and presented the opportunities that I've been able to exploit over the years. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ms. Ragobeer.
You're welcome.
I can definitely relate to having a good family structure and depending on my faith. It appears as though we have a question from the audience. This is from an anonymous attendee. And the question says, what are the psychological effects that comes with transitioning to adulthood? And what coping mechanisms would you recommend? This question was not specific to any panelist, so would anyone like to answer this question?
Go the question again.
What are the psychological effects that comes with transitioning to adulthood, and what coping mechanisms would you recommend?
Wow. Wow. I I have discovered in transitioning to adulthood, you coping mechanisms. I just had to deal with what came with that. I guess in my mind, I just concluded because I came to understand that once you settle things in your mind, you can handle it, right? And I had to come to the place where I understood that, hey, I am leaving my father's house, I am getting married, and I have to handle the things that come with that. I remember, I don't know if this will help. I was engaged for maybe 2 years, and prior to that, I had my courtship and all of that. And when it was coming to the marriage, my father never spoke to me before. He called me and he said, Simon, sit down. He said, no, you are going to take a young lady out of her house where she is accustomed to 3 square meals a day, a roof over her head, a bed to sleep in, and financial support from her family surrounding her. Are you sure you want to do this? And I can tell you, when he put it over like that, I felt a great weight. But love is an amazing thing. And I stepped out and I just took on the responsibility. I don't know if it's you can refer to it as a coping mechanism that I have. I just said, well, this is it, and I have to deal with what comes with it. So I settled in my mind that whatever is coming my way, I am ready to deal with it. And as a matter of fact, I have to deal with it. So that's how I did it.
Would any of the other panelists like to chime in on this question? Thank you, Pastor Harris.
If I narrate the psychological effects that I've personally experienced, perhaps we may have to have these discussions in volumes. In a general sense, our transition into adulthood is really a difficult period of one's life, even when one has the good fortune of growing up in a relatively settled, comfortable, and supportive family structure. One still has to confront the external influences from peers, the external influences from the different forms of media, or the external influences from even the educational materials that we consume. And oftentimes one may even confront the realism of moving away from some of the settled values that we've learned within the comfort of that focused family setting. So some of the mechanisms, because it's really searching, it's really a phase that one searches for one's identity. So I submit that some of the coping mechanisms might be, as Ms. Ragobeer has indicated, grounding oneself in firm moral values, right? And surrounding oneself with positive people. Positive people are really, really important. And the positive people are the ones who would be quite candid with you, the ones who would not be afraid to tell you that you're an idiot when you've been an idiot, the ones who would not bad decisions when you're making bad decisions. I remember one of my really, really close friends, who's like a brother to me, he said to me, I can't understand how you can be so smart and so stupid at the same time. That is the type of conduct that we want to surround ourselves with. So I'm minded that there are a range of coping mechanisms. We may want to find certain expressive outlets, because we know that a lot of folks may even confront thoughts of suicide and these other challenges during that transition period. So we may want to find productive or constructive expressions of our emotions, maybe in the form of writing, maybe in the form of picking up some skill, cooking, whether some craft, poetry, or something of the sort.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniels, for that response, because it is indeed important that external influences do play a major part in the psychological effect that may come with the transition to adulthood. But like you said, grounding yourself in strong moral values and surrounding yourself with positive people do help to lessen the effects that this may bring. So our next question goes to Ms. Gordon as well as Pastor Harris. What steps can a young person actually take to prepare or plan for moving out of adolescent stage or young adult life into adulthood?
All right. Well, I thought about 4 things that I think is important. One is respect yourself. Everything you do, all the choices you make, your successes and your failures are all directly related to how you feel about yourself. When you love yourself and live with confidence, your choices reflect that. Respecting yourself holds the key to personal success and living a happy life. The second thing is follow your passion and do what you love, even if it does not pay very well. If you're good at what you do and love your career choices, the money will eventually flow. The third thing is to be bold. When we're young and we're often nervous and worried about things, but 9 out of the 10 things that we are worried about never happens. Sure, we're gonna have some failures and some challenges and heartbreaks along the way, but so what? The journey is worth it. Ultimately, everything will work out as it should. So you might as well be bold and have fun every step of the way. And the fourth and last thing is to be humble and respectful to all. Humility is frequently associated with being too passive or insecure, but that is not true. I read an article years back in Forbes magazine, and the quote that I read, and I always remember that, it said, to be humble is not to think less of oneself, but to think of oneself less. And those are the things that I try to live by during my time, during my transition. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because, like we talked about earlier, the pressures, the external pressures that you have to deal with, like what you have to deal with in society and what some people condone or say is the right or the wrong thing, or what is it we're trying to accomplish. And I think if we stick to these things, and especially respecting yourself and, you know, follow your passion, because I love to do that. I follow my passion. I go after the things that I love to do. In my bio, I talked about loving technology, loving literacy and numeracy, and sharing it with others. Those are the things that I love to do. And the key for me is to be humble, because it really keeps me grounded. It keeps me focused on the things that can affect my life otherwise. So those are the 4 things that I will say will be some of the things that you can use, the steps you can use when you're transitioning from adolescence to adulthood.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gordon. And the words, everything will work out as it should, I'm certain resonates with our viewers at this time, because I know that this is a phase of our lives where youth tend to worry so much about a lot of
Yes.
things that they oftentimes can't control. So the words, everything will work out as it should, I think means a lot to our viewers at this time. We'll now have Pastor Harris.
Beautiful. I enjoyed what Miss Gordon said. And I would like to add, as you go through this preparation, um, uh, two things that has stuck with me. Fortunately for me, I I committed my life to the Lord very early teens. And I always remember the scripture that says, all the days ordained for me are written in God's book before one of them came to be. And when you check the Hebrew word that translates ordained, it means initiated and structured. And so I am confident in knowing this is was part of my preparation. I know that God has arranged days for me. I just have to prepare myself to walk in them. And then also I understood that the race is not for the swift, or the battle for the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance happens to all. I understood that God gives opportunity to all. So with that confidence, I also took my education seriously. Now I want to press this in because I was not a lover of academics. I was not a lover of the books, but I understood that it is required and it is necessary. So I pushed myself. I That was part of my preparation, taking my studies seriously. The second thing is I found out and I appreciated my gift, the gifting that I had. My gifting is in artistry, caricaturing. I love humor. I grew up in a family that was humorous. It was, so I discovered my gift and I was comfortable with it. People used to refer to me as the Joker, as the comic. It did not bother me. I embraced my gift and I appreciated my gift, and I used my gift for financial reward. So I embraced my gift because that's what brought me income. And then also, I made sure I had mentors. I had fathers. That was part of my preparation transitioning into adulthood. I didn't consult with little boys and little girls about adulthood. I consulted with adults about adulthood and I got counsel. All right. And in that also, lastly, I would say in preparation, in your planning, see if you can start a savings account in your early teens. It is a good plan to give you support as you transition to adulthood. Many people don't do it, but if you can, it would be a great thing because an opportunity will arise for those monies that you have saved that could help you in your transition and your forward movement.
Thank you, Pastor Harris. I'd like to take the time to encourage all attendees to embrace their gift and to find their confidence inside. Our next question is dedicated or is posed to the men on the panelists. Since Mr. Harris just went, I'll ask Mr. Daniels to answer first. So what are some of the struggles that you faced as African Guyanese men during your transition?
Mm,
And how did you navigate them?
mm.
Mr. Daniels?
In terms of struggles, I would say I personally have grown up primarily with females. I've grown up primarily with my grandmother and my aunts and my sisters. My mother was substantially out of my life due to, well, perhaps I should not say out of my life, but in the sense of discharging her responsibilities, because my mom got sick when I was relatively young. I was just 8 years old when my mom got sick. So life radically changed for me then. And from that time, it became painfully obvious to me that there were really no concrete male role models around. And, you know, we're always told that a woman, in as much as a woman can get you that far in parenting you, a woman perhaps is not equipped to teach a man how to be a man. So that is among one of the first challenges I faced. And I know the question is particularly the challenges I faced as an African Guyanese male. If we're to look around us, and I mean, we're being candid here, my experience is not unique. A lot of the young Afro-Guyanese males and perhaps African males in the wider region across the world confront that difficulty as well, either being raised primarily by females or either being raised in an environment where you don't have the best male role models. So I gravitated, as a lot of young African males do, to perhaps the not so positive influences in my community, right? I ran around with some of the colorful folks, if I may describe them as such. But what really assisted me out of that challenge, in particular, the same really good friend I said that told me that he doesn't understand how I'm so smart and I'm equally stupid at the same time. Now, he intervened and provided for me that positive sense of direction, that positive male role model, so that that was really significant help. One of the other challenges I faced, and I've heard this expressed by quite a bit of my African male counterparts, even the very educated ones, are navigating the world of work, having doors shut in your face, that doors which are otherwise open, or other persons who may not look like you and who may not be as qualified as you, or perhaps considerably less qualified than you, would have access to opportunities that you don't have access to. That has been my personal experience. Also, challenges I faced in accessing funding for university, that those experiences were not the experiences of my contemporary males who don't look like me. Also, challenges during the course of university, challenges in my interaction with even law enforcement. And I've just posted a rather lengthy piece narrating some of the experiences I've had with law enforcement. And those are not experiences that I've heard narrated by my male counterparts who don't look like me. And those experiences I've heard narrated on innumerable occasions by my male counterparts who look like me. And it is impressed upon me the inclination to conclude that those challenges, if they're not unique to the Afro-male community, are perhaps predominantly experienced by the Afro-male community.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Daniels. Pastor Harris?
Well, my experience is a bit different. Um, I will say right off that I have experienced racism. Um, I grew up in a household, or my father was very, well, not strongly, but he was into social gatherings. So we would have a lot of people at our house for house parties and that sort of thing. Not the parties that we know of today. Those days he used to waltz and that thing to jazz music and that sort of thing. But and in those gatherings, they were East Indians, they were Chinese, they were Africans, they were Amerindians, they were Europeans. So the idea of facing issues or even racism as a black man, um, I can't say in my time growing up in my father's house that was part of my experience. However, when I transitioned to the field of work, that's when I will say that would be in maybe my mid to late 20s. I had an experience of facing and having to deal with racism. I can't go into a lot of details, but basically, a person that I was a sort of middleman in the business that I was doing, and this person of this particular race had to do a certain part of the work. And I as the middleman, would take the work to him. He would do it. I would collect it, take it to my client. And back then we had about maybe 12, 15 clients. And I would be paid. I would give him, the person of the other race, I would give them their money for the part they did, and I would keep my part. And lo and behold, to find out that that person went behind my back to all the clients and basically undermined me. Now, what was interesting is that this person was making their money. They were making their money, but yet still saw the need to try and get me out of the way. That's when I realized that some people really, they don't want you to economically advance. And that was purely on the basis of race. Now, I will hasten to add that I discovered something. I don't know if my brethren of a darker melanin content, they have realized this, but being of lighter skin has, uh, let me let you know right up, has been helpful to me. I might not have faced the outright brash prejudice in Guyana. I don't know about America, but in Guyana, that my other brothers might have and sisters might have faced. But that has been my experience in transitioning. I encountered that. It was hurtful, it pained, but if you were to ask me how I navigated that, first of all, I did not paint every or the other race with a broad brush. I dealt with every member of that race on the basis of merit. So anytime I encounter anybody of another race, I don't presume they're of a certain disposition. I spend time relating to find out. Okay? And one of the things that helped me, and I hope it helps you, is that I don't know if it's due to my humorous nature, but I am blessed of God in that I don't keep offense, because I've discovered something about offense. The Bible says an offended man is as a fortified city. And what that means, he locks himself in and he locks everybody and everything out. So I have learned not to keep offense. I shed and get rid of offense very quickly. And the young people listening to us tonight, I cannot say that you will not run into this. I cannot say that you will not face prejudice situations at the workplace, on the road, wherever. But you have to learn to live with offense, how to handle it and how to move on from it, how to handle it skillfully. Thankfully, through the word of God, I learned to deal with that very skillfully. And I tend to move on very quickly. That if I had parked myself in a spot after that particular gentleman of a particular race had done what he had done to us, I would have still been miserable and in a lockdown, so to speak. But I moved on. I moved on very quickly. And that's how I handle it. I encourage you to do that. You know, those of you who are into oldies and all of that, you would remember part of the lyrics of a song. It's not a gospel song, but I remember it. It says, "Don't take it personal. Take the bitter with the sweet. Easy come, easy go." Anyhow, I'll stop there because you young people might not know that song.
Thank you so much for that response and such a touching story, Pastor Harris. I think our participants all enjoyed that story, and I think that we will take away the principle from that story and try to use it in our future experiences that we may have.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Melinda Lynch, one of our participants on the call right now. She says, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment to date? So this question is open to all of our panelists at this time. So do we have any volunteers?
Could I go? My
Definitely.
All right. Um Believe it or not, my greatest accomplishment, if I would say that, apart from committing my life to God and growing in God, is my family. At the end of the day, all you have is family, and I I am really thankful that along with the help of my wife, I was able to raise four four of my biological children and one child that is not my biological child. And to see with the combined input of my uniqueness and my wife's uniqueness, we have successful children today. And I would say that has been a great accomplishment for me. And I really have to thank God for the wife of my youth, because if it wasn't for her, the family would not have been where it is today. And the reason that was successful also is because of, remember, I spoke to you before, it's important that you have mentorship. One of the things one of my elders said to me in terms of marriage, he said, never marry a body, you marry a mind. Make sure you're not only interested in the, well, if you're a male, in the three B's: beauty, boobs, and butt. Consult the mind, because at the end of the day, the body goes south of the border, but it's the person, the mind of the person. Because if you're not careful, you might discover the beast in the beauty. don't always remember you marry a mind. And I thank God that that stuck with me. And I can say I have a beautiful family today, a successful family. Everything isn't perfect, but there isn't too much to complain about. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. And so for you, we understand that your greatest accomplishment to date is your very amazing family that you have today. So I would like to also direct this question to Mrs. Ragobeer. What would you say is your greatest accomplishment to date?
Lest I sound like an echo, I would really want to really say, I thought about the question. I said I didn't have to say anything because I think Pastor Simon Harris answered for me, but really and Julie, Miss Lowe, I really want to add, I was thinking there was a little toss up as well. If I could put a little question into sections, and I thought one of the things that I really am grateful for, Miss Lowe, is the opportunity to influence my generation. I think I've had the chance over the years working with youth to share my experience and to help a lot of youth pass making some of the mistakes I've made. I've had the opportunity to sort of in a vicarious way live in their lives by giving them lessons and blessings and benefits I've had. So I think being able to serve my generation, and I think youths listening tonight can do that in different ways. We can serve those around us while some of us may not be married, some of us may not want to be married and all of that and so on, that's okay. And we still believe that we have things that we can offer. And I believe that one of the best ways to go out is empty and serve your generation well. Give to humanity, give to your citizens. We pledge ourselves to love our fellow citizens and all of these things in our national pledge. But I think next to family, just being able to serve my generation and serve them well has been an accomplishment that I hold dear to my heart. Yeah.
If I can add to that as well. I kind of echo both Pastor Harris as well as Ms. Ragobeer to talk about what was important and what's more significant in my life. And I must say family as well. I've got a wonderful son, and the relationship I have with my siblings, I really have a great relationship with it. And not to say that we're perfect, but I think from the background that we had from the parents and how we were taught to live with each other, to love each other, to always be there for each other, I was blessed in such a way that I think some of the things outside of the external things that should have affected me didn't, because I have this family and because I have the support of my family. And like I said, I've got a wonderful son, wonderful young man. I'm very, very proud of him. And then like my sisters, I have some of my sisters on the call. And that's how they support, because I send them the link, and you know, I'm amazed that they're all on the call, because they're all older. My sisters are all older than I am, but they're always there for me, always supporting me, regardless of what it is. So those are the two things important. My son as well as my siblings, they're very, very important to me. Every single one of them. And I feel the love from them, you know, and I'm hoping that they feel mine as well. And like Miss Ragobeer said, just sharing the little bit of knowledge that we have with the younger generation and with our peers is also a huge accomplishment for me. And that's why I got together to form that organization with my family and my friends to do the literacy program, to do the numeracy, because I understand the importance of education, the importance of literacy and numeracy in the world today. So being able to share that, and even, well, for me, my big thing is sharing my technology with everyone. I mean, every time I get a chance, if I can get everybody on technology, I will do that in an instant. So those are the things that I am passionate about. Like I said, my son and my siblings, they're vitally important to me. If something happens to one of them, I take it on so much, because of the love that I have. And it's because of the foundation that our parents and our grandparents had instilled in us that we can still be today, be able to share what we have and to share our knowledge with everyone around. So those, I would reiterate the way Pastor Harris put it over well as Ms. Ragobeer, that those are the most important things in my life.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. We have another question from our chat box, and it asks, how did you deal with failure while transitioning to adulthood? Pastor Simon, we can't hear you. It appears that your mic is muted.
All right, are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. How do you deal with failure? My answer to that is very brief. I expect failure because I am not perfect. And also, I would advise all of our youths, all our persons that are listening to us right now, one important thing: never make failure a monument, or never build a monument to failure. One of the things about monuments is you keep going back to it every year to lay a wreath and bring up old memories. Never make failure a monument. If you have failed at something, the disposition you should have is, I've been there, done that, messed up, now what? What do I do differently? Because you're not perfect. So there will be failure. Expect it, and when it happens, make the adjustment. So you will either not fail again in the future, or you will not fail as much. But the good thing is you'll get better and better as you go along. As you might have heard constantly, the maker of that famous beverage, I don't know if this story is true or not, 7-Up, he failed from 1-Up till up to 6-Up. But he finally got it at 7-Up. And now it's a famous drink.
Kristie, if I could add, please. Hello?
Sure.
Yes. I have a friend actually who would usually say that failure is feedback. And it's a statement that I like. And part of why I like it is because I believe that failure gives vital information. And some of what Pastor Harris just said, indeed, but also it's information that helps you to know what doesn't work, or where not to go, or perhaps how not to approach something. So failure has positives, and so I've learned to embrace it like that, while helping myself to have a better perspective when you fail at something, and taking time to look at it. But one thing I want to leave Kristie with our youth looking or listening this evening is the importance of, depending on what it is you failed at, forgiving yourself, especially if what you failed at was you caused it. Because sometimes we fail at things and it's because of circumstances out of our control, and we have those situations. But tonight I want to leave with our viewers, those listening, the importance of forgiving yourself, learning how to do that. And there's steps to doing that. There is hope. You're alive. And Pastor Harris spoke to us about moving on. But I really want to encourage us this evening not to indeed build a monument there, but have a better perspective. Know that it's feedback, move on. And one of the best places to begin lots of times is by forgiving ourselves. We don't have to do that again. Don't make the mistake again, but we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ragobeer. I once read a quote that said, "Self-doubt kills more dreams than failure does." So my question to you, our panelists, is what advice would you give to a young adult or someone transitioning into adulthood to have more confidence and believe in themselves? Because even I myself have skipped out on some opportunities, not believing that I had the ability to fulfill them. Mr. Daniels?
Oh, thank you. Now, one of the really crucial things in transitioning to adulthood, well, as a matter of fact, at any phase of our lives, and especially when we're making that quantum leap into adulthood, is to have a really strong sense of self. And, oftentimes you would hear persons theorize that, self-esteem is really about self. Having a sense of self is really about self. You are responsible for that. Now, one of the things that I would advise our young people is that you don't ever give anyone that power over you to make you feel any less of a person than you are. Right? There is absolutely no one who deserves more than you. There's absolutely no one who is better than you. And you should always keep that at the back of the core of your mind. But at the same time, as Ms. Gordon has cautioned us on earlier, you would want to temper that with humility, because there is a thin line between self-confidence and haughtiness. So at the same time, you would want to have at the back and front of your mind that I'm really not objectively better than anyone. And it's really important to keep feeding into our systems the positive things. Again, surround yourself with positive people that consume only positive materials. When you do that, that contributes to you building that firm sense of self. And you build a firm sense of self in a three-dimensional way, and not just an inflated, artificial way that you just wake up one morning and say, well, you know what, I'm going to be confident from here on. And as soon as something happens that brushes your ego, you're gone right back to square one, where you go all up in a corner, you doubt yourself, you don't feel good about yourself or anything of the sort. So it's a process, and it's a process that we fortify by keep injecting those positive thoughts into our lives, those positive mandates into our lives, if I may put it that way.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Daniels. Our next question comes from one of our participants. The question reads, what words of encouragement can you give to a person that is forced to transition to an adult based on experiences such as losing your parents? This question comes from Jamal Edinburgh. So I know that Ronald touched on this question a bit earlier, so maybe you can maybe add a few more words to this question, please, Mr. Daniels.
Thank you again for the invitation. Now, Jamal, I take for granted that that question is really asked from a personal place. In a sense, you find a brother in me. While I did not lose my mother to death, I lost my mother. I lost my mother to sickness. And I would say that I've spent the greater part of my life being more of a father to my mother than my mother has had the opportunity to be a mother to me. And if the loss that you're inquiring about is that loss of not having your parent at all, and especially if you had a really close relationship with that parent of both parents, if both of them are lost, and those parents have really been there for you, then that can really, really be a deep wound. One of the things that you would want to do is celebrate your parents the same way that I constantly celebrate my mom. right, you always ask yourself, had my parents been here, what would they have wanted for me? The decisions I'm making, would those decisions be in tune with my parents' values? If you're going through certain challenges, you'd ask yourself, what advice would I have gotten from my parents in these circumstances? So, your parents still continue to live on in you, and your parents still get a chance, as bizarre as it may seem, to still parent you in that way, even though they're not there. But of course, you still would want to have the positive external influence, right? Again, I can't overemphasize the importance of tying ourselves to positive people. And especially at that point in your life where you've suffered such an overwhelming loss, right? You don't want that void to be filled by anything negative, and you don't want that void to be filled by anybody that is negative, right? You just surround yourself with people who can help you to move from point A to point B in a positive and constructive way. I take it for granted Pastor Simon would like to amplify that.
If I can add to what Ronald said, you can, if you have not gone through it, you can only imagine what it is. The basis for that question, what that young person would have gone through. However they lost that person in their life, how, for whatever reason, they were forced to transition. If it's, I think they said they might have lost the parent or the caregiver through death. Two things. This might sound a bit callous, but I've learned something from over the years dealing with death. And that is, always remember, after someone dies, you still have to live. It might seem a simple statement, but it will point you in a certain direction. And I would like to leave that with the person along with this, because I cannot know how you're feeling. I have never experienced that. I have seen people who have experienced that, and I was able to help them. But what also helps is when you experience such a traumatizing thing, never ask yourself, why me? A lot of people spend time asking, why me? Why I had to lose my mom? Why I had to lose my father? Why I had to lose this person close to me? Why I had to lose this? Why me? Why me? Why me? Why me is never a progressive question. Always ask yourself, what now? What now? While you go through your trauma, that is the progressive question. Not why me, what now? And that question, when you ask yourself, it will begin to point you in a direction of what you need to do to survive, to come out of that. So I leave that with you. Don't ask why me, ask what now.
Thank you so much for providing these words to our participants at this time. I hope it answers his question as far as possible. Our next question comes from Miss Rowena, and so I'm going to direct this question to both Mrs. Ragobeer and Miss Marva Gordon. The question reads, I'm not sure whether this was asked before, but what financial advice would you give to young women who are now finding their footing in the world? Mrs. Ragobeer?
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Actually, looking back at my own experience, I'm not sure of the person's experience, but I think of my mom, who really spent time with me, even taking me through the market to ensure that I understood why she would buy the bora at this stall and not that stall, and teaching me, you know, what she thought was prudent financial management, making sure that I got it right. And really, I learned a lot from my mother in terms of dealing with finances. Even as you transition though, one of the things that I would really want to advise, this might sound counter, but it's learning really how to manage yourself. I want to begin there. And because you could have an account and so on, and people just go to the account and draw out all of the funds. But I think as a young woman coming up, one of the things that I had to learn is that I was not waiting for my knight in shining armor to come on a white horse and save me. And I learned early not to be like an ambulance, to always wah, 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 wah. I learned early as a young lady that it was important that even this had nothing to do with Christianity at that time, like I'm talking about my mom, that my role was to add. That when I got a home, that when you become a woman, meaning an adult female, that it spelled responsibility, it spelled taking care, you're gonna learn how to manage a home and all of these things. So Guy wasn't in there as yet. So I learned independence, and a large part of that had to do with managing myself so that I could manage the resources that I am given. Now I know that people will say, sometimes, you know, we don't get enough money. Sometimes we don't even see the ends, much more to make the ends meet. And there are lots of things out there. But I have found managing yourself and learning how to say no to yourself, learning how to wait a little bit longer, learning how to save, and all of that really helps, all right? And learning to support the people in your life. Now, even as it's come to like a relationship, by the time I got married and all of that, there are a couple of things that I had, and I learned early too about vex money. And I'm not sure how many you know about that, vex money. So even while I was courting, my fiance at the time, well, it's my husband now and he's hearing me, but he couldn't make styles on me. I always had a stash, so he couldn't carry me anywhere and leave me. So as a woman, I always got a transportation to go back home. I learned when I went out that I ain't ordering nothing that I really can't afford to buy because he can take it back. And I mean, my husband's a Christian, but these are things in terms of as a woman managing myself. And so when I transitioned to marriage, I had a couple of things to offer, you know. I'm not going to necessarily say all of those things. So it wasn't just depending on, but understanding as an adult female or a woman that I needed to bring something to the table. And a large part of that, like I said, began with learning to manage myself so I could have something. So when the brother and I started to talk, I could say, well, this is my portion, as small as it would have been, at least I had something, right? But you really got to learn to manage yourself and learn how to have a bank account and all of those things. But with good self-management and you having a plan and you're looking forward, and believe you me, a lot of things happened to me really through the grace of God as well. So I would want to encourage the person there and stop so Miss Garden could have her say at this time.
All right. I have to echo what Mrs. Ragobeer said, especially about the vex money. And those are things that you're taught from home. And just with, like you, my experience with my mom started a penny bank that she started from home. So teaching us how to save at a very young age, because she had the community and all of us here, whatever little money you've got your little, allowance at the end of the week, you have to put aside something. So at the end of the year, you've got your money, your Christmas money that you can spend and do things. And again, even though the young person has asked the question, it's difficult for you if you're not being taught that at home, or even taught that by some caring adult, how to manage your finances. You wouldn't know how to. So, and your parents is such an important part of your upbringing and of who you are today. And like I said, my mom with the penny bank, so we know from early that you need to save your money. You don't go out there as a young woman depending on a guy to pay your way. And just like Ms. Ragobeer said, with our VEX money and our transportation money and we want to go Dutch because you don't want you to spend all your money because you're going to expect something at the end of the night because you spent your money. So these are things that your parents taught you, or your older siblings. Like I said, I'm the youngest sister. You know, I've got 4 older sisters, and learning from them, and you know, they will tell you things, and you will see some of the things. So you get to understand some of that, but you have to be taught some of this, because financial management is not something that you automatically know how to do. So if you're not guided, or you're not shown the right way and properly how to manage money, you wouldn't know how to, because you will just go out there and your first paycheck, you go and blow it out and spend it out and not putting aside anything, like the old people would say, for a rainy day, you know. I didn't understand what that meant when I was younger, when they said, put aside money for a rainy day. I said, but wait a minute, it's raining now. Do I need the money for something, you know? But it's still, I got older, then I realized what it meant, that you need to have money somewhere put aside, that when things are not going the way they should, that you have some fallback plan, you have something to pick up on. So again, this is a great opportunity for us, as for me and Ms. Ragobeer, and even all the panelists, to be able to share some of these experiences, because some of you might not have gotten that education at home, or even from your peers. So it's good for us to have this opportunity to share that with you.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon, for informing us on the importance of financial literacy and the importance of some concepts like saving. Our next question reads, is it possible to have it all? Academic success, a good career, healthy relationships, and a family of your own? Pastor Simon?
I don't know how to approach that question, because what is academic success? A doctorate? A master's? I have achieved some qualifications, you know. I don't know if I can say I have academic success. You know, I have about 3 letters after my name. So, but how do I answer that? I have, for want of a better, I do have a good career, because I am doing what God has called me to do. So I have job satisfaction. I have healthy relationships with my family and others outside my family, my siblings. I have healthy relationships. And healthy relationships don't mean perfect relationships. It just means that any problem we have, we sort it out like adults. And I have a family of my own. So I guess I can say, yes, it is possible. It is possible if you work carefully and skillfully and trust God.
If I could add, I really would echo the last words from Pastor Harris. Yes, I think it is possible to have it all. But I also want to just encourage and perhaps caution that not everything will all happen all at the same time. For some, because you see, we all wear different shoes. We each have a different path. Our lives are different. And so different things will happen for us at different stages. And I think at this point, I would want to just encourage even things like goals, because you could have a goal. And when you reach to that goal, you can say, well, okay, for example, in your academics, so I've been successful, I have achieved this particular thing. I wanted this career and I've achieved it, and so on. So a number of things in our lives would just flow over into each other. But I want to say that things may happen at different stages. They wouldn't all happen all at once. And I think sometimes for some young people, growing older or looking across at other people's lives, we have this utopic idea about adulthood. And so when we get to certain stages and things don't happen for us at the time we envisage, we've become very, very discouraged. But I want to encourage you to just continue to press on, because not everything will happen for each of us the same way it happened for somebody else. And another thing I want to caution, even as we think about healthy relationships, family of your own and all of that, I want to encourage you. My mom used to say something to me, and then there's biblical basis for it as well. Mommy always said to us, you don't take other people's eye and see. And basically what that means is comparing ourselves. Even the Bible tells us
Only a
comparing
fool does
ourselves
that.
among ourselves, we become fools. And sometimes what happens, we're taking other people's eye to see our life in these very areas of academic, academic success, career, and all of that. And so it becomes a burden because most times, Kristie, what we do, we usually compare ourselves down. I know Ronald was talking about the pride and Ms. Gordon talk about being humble, but most times when we're comparing ourselves against someone who has achieved more, and we feel bad about ourselves. But I think all of these things are possible, but we must remember that life happens in stages and seasons. And the scripture teaches me that everything is beautiful in its time. And if we understand that, we will appreciate that we can have it all, but we may not have it all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Ragobeer.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Daniels, were you saying something?
Yeah, this is really an irresistible topic. And I do echo the sentiments of both Pastor Harris and Mrs. Ragobeer. And I would just kind of emphasize, now having it all is really subjective.
Yep.
Yes. We as individuals define what is academic success for us, what is a healthy family relationship for us, and what is having that job security. But I would urge us to perhaps go a tad beyond that. I think the general consensus is that it is, of course, possible to have it all, but then have it all, then what?
Yes. Yeah.
So these accomplishments must not be an end in themselves, right? It must be a means to an end, like having academic success, for instance. What are you doing with that academic success? Are you contributing towards reaching out to helping hand to somebody else? What are you doing with that job security and the financial success it comes with? Are you extending a helping hand to somebody else? What are you doing with that familial success? Are you guiding somebody else on the broad parameters of having healthy familial relationships? Right, so we should really graduate our thinking beyond just these bare accomplishments and to perhaps start articulating ways in which these accomplishments can contribute towards the betterment of society.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
So this is our final question, and this question goes to all of our panelists as we will be wrapping up now. The question reads, if you can go back to your younger years, is there anything you would have changed or done differently? Could we start with you, Mrs. Ragobeer?
Really? No problem at all. This has been a joy for me this evening. But to get to the question, I think yes, definitely. And I was thinking, Miss Lowe, that if you all would permit me to take this memory card that I have now from this life back to my younger days, certainly there are lots of things that I would change because I've learned a lot, and a lot of things are stored on this hard drive that I have here now. But to really leave an answer, so to give my colleagues a chance to answer as well, I would really say three things. One, I would serve the Lord Jesus from younger. Earlier, I said this has been hands down the best decision of my life. And if I could go with this hard drive, this memory card and so on, I would serve him from younger. The other thing that I would do is I would trust my instincts as a woman. I would trust my gut more, believe in myself and believe in the things that, yes, that I'm sensing, I feel, and yes, because yes, of a lot of experiences I've had. And the final one that I will say is that, you know what I would do? I would marry my husband sooner. Definitely. So I would serve Jesus from younger. I would trust my instincts as a woman more. And I would definitely marry my husband sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Ragobeer. Pastor Harris?
It's a tough question. If I could go back to my younger years, if there's anything I would have changed or done differently, I don't know, because all that I have gone through and all that I have done have tempered me and molded me and shaped me into the person I am today. So I am not too sure what I would go back and change. But for the sake of our young people, if there's one thing I would have done differently, is to make sure I diligently and diligently save. I would have worked hard on a savings account from my youth up, even from 12. I would have worked on a savings account, because I've discovered opportunity always comes and meets preparation. And this world in which we live, and I would like to leave this with our youth, this world in which we live, finances play an important role in your upward mobility. So that is one thing I would change. But I would hasten on to add that God has been faithful. God has been faithful, and God has supplied, even though I fell short in that. Because I remember I got married with $300 Guyana in the bank and a lot of faith. I don't recommend it, but that is one thing I would change. I would be more diligent with savings.
Thank you so much for your honest response, Pastor Harris. I think that this means a lot to our participants listening right now. And I'm going to ask Ms. Gordon to give us her take on this question.
I have to elaborate a bit on what Pastor Harris said about not changing anything. I don't think there is anything significant that I will change, because for what has happened in my life and my experiences shaped who I am today. It makes me the person I am. So I think that was my path to take. That was my destiny. This is the way my life should have gone. This is what I believe. To make me the person I am, for me to be more open and more sharing with my knowledge to people. And I think this is all my life experiences has led me here. One of the things, and going back, maybe talking to the younger people, is the important thing of understanding who you are. Who you are, what are your roles and responsibilities? You know, what is expected of you? So these are the things that we need to understand. As I got older, I understood that. When I was younger, I didn't, because I didn't know, you know, and because of the experiences, I know that now, that I needed to understand who I am. Also for younger people, that you have to set your goals, set your priorities in your life. What is important? Is it family first? Is it education? Because I know the previous question they asked about if you can have it all. And as well as Ms. Ragobeer says that you can have it all, but at a certain time. But then, as Mr. Daniel said, you know, after you have it all, then what? So my take on it is that we can never have it all because there is always something else. Whether it's not even about your academic success or about what you've accomplished financially, but what else is there? Let's move beyond that, because there's lots of us in the panel, like, you know, Pastor Harris said he's got 3 initials behind his name, but then what? You know, what do we do? How do we say that we've accomplished this academically while as we live, we're still learning? We will always be learning. So I will say, first of all, you need to understand who you are and then what your responsibilities and what your role in this world is and what you would like it to be.
That is so true, Ms. Garden. I agree 100%. Thank you so much for sharing that. And our last speaker, Mr. Daniels, would you take a go at this topic?
Thank you, Ms.
Question, should I repeat the question or?
I'm minded of the question.
Pardon?
I'm minded of the question. I can proceed.
Okay, great.
Now, if I can go back and have a chat with little Ronald, trust me, you would not recognize him today. Now, I do agree with my colleagues that ultimately the sum of our experiences is what makes us into persons we are. But for me personally, I think that I perhaps could have still been the person that I am today, even if some of the hardships that I've experienced had been tempered. So I would certainly want to temper quite a bit of the hardship I've experienced. And one of the things I would tell young Ronald is to not squander your time. Time is a really, really important asset, and once expended, we don't get it back. And I really do appreciate that now that I'm getting the grace. But once we don't squander our time, there is so much nonsense. Well, I'm speaking for me in particular. There's so much nonsense I would have cut out of my experience. And one of the things I would have certainly done is invested more time in the education that is really germane to growing to be a productive citizen in society and going to be more of a wholesome person, because I've always been of the view that much of what we learn in the traditional education system is really a waste of time. And much of the really progressive things that we learn in that parallel education system. So I would have certainly spent more time in that parallel education system from a relatively tender age. And I take it for granted that my wife is watching. I would have certainly not played as hard to get as I did. I would have submitted to her advances relatively earlier, right, so that I can have, I could have managed this sense of direction that I have. And I remember we asked the question earlier as to some of the things that, or some of the persons that have really contributed significantly to our lives. And I would certainly say my wife. My wife, since we met, has challenged me to be a better person in every sense of the word, every step of the way, and every single day. So that is one of the things I would have told my younger self. Listen, just give in to this girl, a little early and get your life on track. And last but not least, I would have urged my younger self to cultivate that relationship with God at a relatively tender stage, because once we have that foundation, it saves us from quite a bit of missteps. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't go off the tracks, but we may not venture too far off the tracks. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for such articulate and thorough responses. But there you have it, folks. Our speakers have filled the facts this week, providing us with some excellent life hacks. And our panelists also underscored that we should give ourselves for our failures. Mentorship is indeed critical. Some of our greatest accomplishments might be family and even influencing the next generation. And it is actually possible to have it all. I want you to take away with you, however, before we leave this program, that all that has happened has molded into who you are today. And like our speakers have said, believe in yourself. Kristie?
On behalf of the International Decade for People of African Descent, I would like to thank all 4 of our remarkable panelists for dedicating their time and giving their very valuable contributions regarding the navigation process of transitioning to adulthood. I would also like to thank you, our attendees, for staying with us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next informative session next week, Thursday. Same place, same time. My name is Kristie Duff, and on behalf of myself and my co-host, Ms. Lowe, I would like to thank you all once again, as it was an absolute pleasure. Good night. Please remember to like our Facebook page. It's IDPADA-G Youth Committee. Once again, good night.